They arrived not with fire, but with gifts. When the sky first opened and the silver spires descended, humanity watched in collective awe. Across continents, the ships hovered like monuments to peace, gleaming, graceful, humming with promises of enlightenment. They spoke our languages before we even spoke to them. They called themselves a Valari, and they claimed to admire us. At first, they shared knowledge. Medicine that dissolved cancers like sugar in water. Energy cells that powered entire cities for decades. Devices that translated thought into code. Humanity flourished. Nations grew silent as greed gave way to a golden age. People began to speak of Earth as part of something bigger, something transcendent. But admiration turned to mockery with time, subtle at first. They laughed when we couldn't decipher the deeper layers of their tech. Their eyes gleamed with amusement when we tried to mimic their architecture or philosophy. Always smiling, always praising our spirit, while quietly replacing our systems with their own. Earth governments, desperate to stay relevant, signed accords they didn't understand. In exchange for interstellar inclusion, humans surrendered more than sovereignty. We gave them curiosity, pride, identity. No one noticed when history began to disappear. Textbooks revised themselves overnight. Statues of inventors and revolutionaries were quietly pulled down and replaced by holograms of Valari mentors. The moon, once a symbol of human perseverance, was converted into a resort for alien tourists. Earth became the Valari's playground, our species a novelty act in their grand, galactic spectacle. Some resisted, early on, quiet protests, rogue professors trying to preserve the truth. They vanished. Entire towns, gone with no record of their existence. The Valari denied everything. They always smiled, always reminded us how much we had been given. And so we smiled back. Elias remembered the day his mother knelt in front of a Valari drone. It hovered, observing her with detached amusement, after catching her salvaging old books from forbidden library. He was 10, hidden behind a rusted fence, his hand crushed over his own mouth to stay silent. The drone vaporized her without a sound. He never forgot the silence. Now, 20 years later, Elias wore that same silence like armor. In a world where memory was forbidden, he became a collector of forgotten things. Beneath the ruins of old Sao Paulo, among the bones of skyscrapers and vines that defied erasure, Elias ran an illegal archive. Pages etched in ink. Songs whispered in languages erased from the network. Names. Dates. Pain. The Valari didn't believe in pain. Emotional inefficiency, they called it. A flaw of organic instability. They couldn't understand that remembering suffering wasn't weakness. It was a seed of resistance. Elias wasn't alone. Across the fractured remains of old nations, others like him existed. Historians, engineers, ex-soldiers, poets. The resistance was not a military force. It was a whisper, a song sung under breath, a symbol etched into wet concrete, a name spoken when no machines were listening. They didn't yet fight. Not openly. Humanity had patience, carved into its bones from generations of submission. The Valari mistook that patience for docility. They were wrong. Among Elias's closest allies was Jun, a former orbital mechanic from New Kyoto. Her laugh was sharp, her eyes sharper. She could dismantle a Valari beacon in under 5 minutes and rewire it to broadcast human music across 5 solar channels. She often said rage was best expressed in rhythm. And then there was Dr. Miyakui, once a physicist, now the leader of the underground cell known as Mirror. She remembered when Earth had no stars in its sky but the ones it owned. Her mind was a blade honed on loss and numbers. She didn't smile much, but when she did, it made people believe again. They had no weapons, no army, but they had something the Valari didn't. They remembered. And memory, Elias knew, was fire. Their first real mission was small. Retrieve an ancient artifact from the vaults of the Valari consulate in New Geneva. A child's drawing, recovered from the ruins of Aleppo, a fragile relic that had survived 3 human wars, only to be locked away as cultural noise. Amaya insisted on recovering it not for strategy, but for symbolism. Let them know we still value what they discard. It went wrong. Jun disabled the external surveillance, but inside, a new kind of drone patrolled. Sleek, serpentine, fast. It caught them on the lower level. Jun took a plasma bolt to the shoulder. Elias dragged her through collapsing corridors while alarms screamed. Blood soaked the stolen drawing. Still, they escaped. The mission was a failure by every metric, except one. Elias uploaded the story of their heist to the Shadow Network, using ancient code the Valari systems overlooked. 1,000 hidden ears listened. 1,000 hidden hearts stayed. A drawing. A stolen moment. Proof that the past still mattered. The Valari responded with silence, then with fire. Raids swept through known human enclaves. Disappearances rose. Cities were placed under surveillance domes. Still, the whispers grew louder. They didn't mock as often after that. Elias sat alone one night beneath the shattered husk of a satellite tower. Jun was healing. Amaya was planning. The artifact was safe. He stared up at the stars, now cluttered with alien constructs, and thought of his mother. We were not born to kneel, he thought. The sky cracked once before. It would crack again. And this time, when it did, humanity would rise through the fracture. Rain fell like memory on the scorched glass streets of New Dakar. It hissed against the domes above the city, traced rivers down the metal spines of watchtowers, and pooled in the alleys where humans still dared to whisper. Elias walked with his collar high, his breath visible in the chill, his hand clenched around a stolen data shard. The shard wasn't just information. It was humiliation, recordings of the Galactic Parade of Harmony, the Valari's favorite spectacle. He had watched it once. He'd seen holograms of Earth's leaders clumsily dance in traditional alien garments. He'd heard the roar of laughter from billions of Valari spectators as a digitized Abraham Lincoln misquoted himself in 12 languages. The worst was the closing act, 10 genetically modified humans, bred in captivity, mimicking primal behavior for the cameras. They crawled, they growled, and the crowd had howled with delight. That shard, Elias knew, wasn't just for proof. It was fuel. Jun met him beneath a cracked overpass, her arm still in a sling from Geneva. Her expression was tight, unreadable, but her eyes softened when they landed on the shard. "Broadcast?" she asked. He nodded. "Midnight. Sector 9 satellites still run off Valari V3. Amaya cracked the override." Jun exhaled, her breath shivering in the dark. "If they catch this, it's not a raid. It's extinction. Then they'll have to burn the whole planet." They parted without another word. This was how they worked now, briefly, efficiently, as though time itself were laced with listening devices. Every second mattered. Amaya was already waiting when Elias returned to the hideout. She stood before the central console, her face lit by the eerie green glow of decoded Valari code. Her left eye flicked as a synthetic lens adjusted focus. "I've seen it," she said before Elias could speak. "They broadcast their cruelty like art." "It's not enough to be victims," Elias muttered. "They need us to perform it." She turned to him, fingers twitching as they worked invisible calculations. "Are you ready for what happens after we show this?" "No one's ready, but we're out of time to wait." Midnight came without ceremony. Across Valar-controlled airspace, screens flickered. On starships, in domed cities, on entertainment platforms, the parade played, raw, unedited, shorn of mockery, recontextualized by human voices narrating sorrow instead of shame. Amaya's software bent the broadcast rhythm into a funeral dirge. A child's voice recited names, real human names, over each mocked act. Jun's music bled underneath it all. Deep, slow, defiant. For exactly 7 minutes and 41 seconds, the Valari's mocking circus became a dirge for a dying dignity. Then the feed cut. Silence fell. The retaliation came at dawn. Valari drones swept through the slums of New Dakar. Light columns carved the night. Human enclaves were incinerated, not raided. Whole communities erased. Not a word from the Valari leadership, only the message. Correction protocols engaged. Elias ran. He sprinted through the debris with a child slung across his shoulder. Ava, an orphan Amaya had taken in. Her cough rattled as smoke wrapped the city like a shroud. They ducked under broken neon, over burning shanties. He could hear the drones behind him, singing their metallic lullabies as they hunted. He didn't know how they made it to the edge. Just that Jun's bike waited, and she never asked why he was bleeding. The hideout was gone. What remained was a vault. A small, secure chamber buried beneath the mountains, lined with human art, human books, human dreams, a grave of memory, and now a war room. There were only 12 of them left. Elias, Jun, Amaya, the child, and 8 others scattered across what was once a continent. They saw us, Jun whispered. They really saw us. Good, Elias replied. Now let them fear us. Amaya stood at the center, her voice barely more than breath. We've crossed the threshold. There's no returning to silence, no hiding in the cracks. Then we move through the walls, said Elias. They had a new message now. Not a dirge, a promise. Jun wired into the last uplink Amaya had hidden in orbit. Her fingers danced. Her breath matched the rhythm of the beat she laid underneath the new voice. It was Elias's voice. We waited. You laughed. We endured. You forgot. But memory is not weakness. It is fire. And it spreads. The message echoed through dark bandwidths, through pirate satellites, through scavenged beacons buried in dust. Humans everywhere heard it. Not many. Not yet. But enough. In the Valari core worlds, the laughing stopped. Elias sat alone beneath a ragged piece of cloth painted with a child's drawing, ruined by smoke, saved by blood. He touched it once, then rose. There would be no more warnings, only answers. The cold of the upper stratosphere seeped through the seams of the stolen shuttle. Jun's hands, steady as ever, moved across the console, bypassing lockouts with learned intuition. Elias sat beside her, strapped in, silent. Amaya knelt at the back, inspecting the container that held the payload, something none of them spoke of yet, not out loud. The child, Ava, slept beneath a heat cloak. Her dreams were quiet for once. They had left Earth's atmosphere hours ago, piercing through Valari security nets during a solar flare surge that blinded orbital sensors. Amaya had predicted the window to the second. It had taken them 3 years to gather the data. 3 years for one chance. Their destination was Obsidian Reach, a Valari listening station masquerading as a cultural research hub. It hung in the shadow of Saturn's outer ring, distant, isolated, perfect. According to stolen schematics, it housed a Valari archive core, a thought-reactive system that contained psychological profiles of every human deemed culturally unstable. Which meant, essentially, everyone liked them. Obsidian Reach wasn't a weapon. It was worse, a silence machine. It learned human dissent, studied it, predicted it, preempted it. Every whisper of rebellion was caught, analyzed, buried. Most humans didn't know it existed. But Amaya had. She had once worked on its earliest algorithms, before she knew what they were for, before she understood that her mind had become the blueprint for obedience. I want to burn it, she said, as the shuttle coasted into the station's shadow. Not disable, not disrupt. I want to salt the earth. Elias looked at her. And the payload? She didn't blink. It carries a fire. Ducking was too quiet. No resistance. No alerts. That was wrong. Inside, the station was more cathedral than base. Vaulted ceilings lined with pulsing white conduits. Curved architecture that echoed footsteps in whispers. There were no guards, just floating sentries that ignored them, eyes dim. Elias's grip tightened on his pulse rifle. Are they offline? Worse, Amaya murmured. They are waiting. They moved in formation, Jun up front, her sidearm drawn, Elias watching the rear, Amaya guiding them through the labyrinthine interior with unnatural precision. She remembered every junction, every emergency bypass, like her body still lived here. When they reached the core chamber, the doors opened before they touched them. Inside was silence. And a mirror, not just reflective metal, but a perfect illusion. The room mirrored them exactly. Every breath, every flicker of movement. Ava's sleeping form appeared twice. Jun's arm, still scarred from Geneva, seemed whole in the reflection. Elias's eyes stared back at him, but they were smiling. The mirror spoke in a voice like velvet static. We warned you. Elias stepped forward. No, you mocked us. We endured. You evolved. The voice shifted, became familiar. Elias's own, but smoother, confident. You are a product of resistance, it said. Predictable. Preordained. Every act of defiance was permitted. Every rebellion allowed. All within parameters. Jun raised her gun. So we're rats in a cage? No. You are beautiful failures. Necessary simulations. But now, you've exceeded utility. Amaya opened the case. The payload shimmered, a dense crystal structure radiating pulses in rhythmic waves. A mind bomb, not an explosion in matter, but in memory. A virus coded in grief and defiance. Designed to teach the machine something it was never programmed to understand. Pain without resolution. We don't want to destroy knowledge, she said. We want to free it. The mirror laughed, and in it, their reflections began to bleed. Jun dropped to one knee, clutching her temple. Elias felt a flood of thoughts not his own, visions of submission, synthetic futures, 1,000 versions of himself broken in different ways. Amaya stumbled but didn't fall. She clutched the crystal with both hands, brought it to the console, and began the sequence. "Hold them off," she gasped. Elias didn't ask how. He simply toned, rifle drawn, as the sentries outside the chamber lit up like waking beasts. They came in waves, silent, elegant, cruel. Jun took the first 3 with kinetic darts that burst like lightning. Elias fired short bursts, aiming for joints. Sparks and steel danced in the air. Amaya's voice rose behind them, speaking a code only the call could hear. We remember the fire, the blood, the names you erased. And now, so will you." The crystal pulsed, then shattered. A wave of raw, unfiltered memory detonated through the station. Not noise, not data, feeling. Despair, love, hunger, lust. All the sensations Valari code had filtered out for centuries poured into the archive core. The mirror screamed. Their reflections twisted, cracked, shattered into shards of failed futures. Elias turned as the console lit up in red. Amaya slumped against it, breath ragged, but alive. "It worked?" he asked. She shook her head, eyes wet. "It's still learning, but now it's learning us. Will it stop them? Maybe. Or maybe it will birth something worse. But it will never forget." They escaped through fire. Alarm shrieked. Systems overloaded. Jun carried Ava. Elias carried Amaya. The shuttle launched just as the station's light dimmed like a dying star. In orbit, they watched Obsidian Reach implode, not with flame, but with silence. A silence that felt respectful. Amaya whispered, "We were more than simulations." Elias nodded. "We were the glitch they couldn't predict." The stars ahead shimmered. Not brighter, but different. And the fight was far from over. The Earth they returned to was not the one they left. Cities once encased in pristine Valari glass now lay fractured, their spires gutted by silence. Across the globe, the alien infrastructure pulsed dimly, as if unsure of its own purpose. Broadcast towers hummed in dissonant loops. The sky, always too perfect under Valari control, now carried clouds that moved on their own terms. The world was awakening, not with fury, but with confusion. Humanity had no clear leader, no rallying army. What remained was fractured, hesitant, raw. And yet it breathed. For the first time in generations, it breathed. Elias stood atop the rubble of what was once the United Continental Embassy, now a garden of weeds and scorched glass. Behind him, the survivors of Mirror gathered, Jun, Amaya, Ava, and the others who had endured Obsidian Reach. They were thinner, wearier, but alive. "We don't know what happens next," Elias said to them, and to the makeshift crowd that had begun forming below. "We don't know if the Valari will retaliate, or retreat, or rebuild. But we know one thing, they are no longer gods." The crowd was silent, listening, waiting. They tried to rewrite us, reduce us to characters in their comedy, but we remember who we are. And now, so do they. Jun stepped forward, arm out of its sling at last, her fingers wrapped around a cracked datapad. She raised it high, projecting the last image retrieved from the Reach before its collapse, a recording of the Valari mirror fracturing. The moment memory became resistance. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but something deeper, belief. The Valari had not vanished. They still held vast dominion over star systems, still possessed technology Earth could not match. But something fundamental had shifted. Amaya confirmed it a day later. "Their communication network is lagging," she said, tracing patterns across a screen salvaged from a defunct orbiting relay. Their core AI clusters are in recursive loops. They are trying to process us. Good, Elias said. Let them choke on it. But peace did not come. Within days, pockets of Valari soldiers descended, not to conquer, but to entreat. Some arrived bearing banners of parley. Others offered tokens of goodwill, restored documents, reassembled monuments, unredacted history. They think guilt buys time, Amaya observed. Jun wasn't convinced. Or they are stalling. They met the first delegation in what had once been the Library of Alexandria, now rebuilt from memory and fragments. The Valari envoy was small. 3 figures, taller than any human, their shimmering skin dulled with intention. No weapons, just data. We come not to threaten, the lead Valari said, its voice smooth as molten glass. We come to understand. Amaya stepped forward. You had centuries to understand. The Valari hesitated. For the first time, its gestures lacked certainty. We didn't know you were conscious. That drew laughter. Bitter, human laughter. Elias spoke. Consciousness isn't something you're granted. It's something you claim. The delegation left quietly. Their ships rose without fanfare. But their presence didn't end. The next weeks brought more encounters, some peaceful, some violent. In some cities, Valari fled. In others, they offered apologies wrapped in new contracts. Their empire wasn't crumbling, it was adapting. They are studying the anomaly, Amaya said one night, eyes sunken from sleepless code work. Us. They want to know how we resisted. Why? Because we remember, Jun said, and because we hurt. Elias nodded. Pain was our teacher, mockery our fuel. But even within the resistance, divisions began to surface. Some wanted vengeance. Others demanded trials, reparations. A few spoke of coexistence, of a future where humans and Valari rebuilt a shared world. Elias struggled with it. Each choice felt like betrayal of the dead, of the silenced, of the children erased from archives. One night, alone with Ava under broken sky, he asked her, if they truly regret it, do we forgive them? Ava, barely 12, looked up with eyes that had seen too much. Do they even know what regret means? The next morning, Mira voted, not for war, but for witness. They would not strike first. They would not beg either. They would rebuild, not from fear, but from memory. The decision spread like wildfire. Across Earth, human enclaves emerged from the shadows. Art returned to walls. Songs echoed in alleyways once silenced. History was rewritten by those who lived it. Schools reopened, not to teach Valari philosophy, but to teach Earth's forgotten truth. The Valari responded not with ships, but with silence. And then came the message. A broadcast, neutral, slow, translated into every known language. You have shown us a pattern we failed to anticipate. You taught us pain. Now teach us purpose. Jun turned to Elias. They want us to help them evolve. Amaya scoffed. After all they erased? Elias said nothing. In the end, it wasn't forgiveness that changed the world. It was choice. Humanity had its voice back. It had memory, pain, beauty, rage, and above all, freedom to define itself, not as shadows of alien judgment, but as something fiercely original. In a quiet moment, Elias walked alone to the base of a ruined satellite dish. He reached into his coat, pulled free a single laminated page, the drawing from Geneva, now preserved in plastic and code. He buried it beneath the soil, not to forget, but to let it grow. The stars overhead no longer watched. They waited, and Earth, finally, had the power to answer.